political gangs or political thugs, well, basically band together in the common cause of, enriching themselves and their careers under the guise of a belief in some political system. Of course, sincere believers in democratic rule would never do the things that these lowlives do. Real advocates of democracy are disgusted by groups who use strong arm tactics to get their way or to fix elections. Some gangs had no political views of their own, still owe their allegiance to certain socioeconomic conditions or factors, and could not exist or could not have existed without the capitalist snobbery of the late 19th, early 20th century. A snobbery that in many ways still holds sway to this very day. Now, an early and prime example of these political gangs of thugs were the Bloody Tubs. The Tubs operated in Baltimore during the mid-19th century. Their specialty was intimidating voters into casting ballots for a specified politician on Election Day. The gang's name came from their habit of grabbing political rivals and dunking them head first in the, blood and guts filled catch tubs at a neighborhood slaughterhouse. These guys were not very nice people. Now, their services went to the highest bidder, and they had no specific political ideology or allegiance, except for money, that is. Now, eventually, the Bloody Tubs' actions became so nutsoid that no politician would do business with them. And with the loss of their political protection, the gang vanished from sight by the early 1870s. But just about every major city or town in the United States had their own unique versions of political gangs like the Bloody Tubs. Thugs who helped keep corrupt officials ruling their lucrative and rather illegal empires. Now, as the years rolled on, these gangs of political thugs became far more sophisticated and far more respectable, and would reach the very pinnacles of political power. For example, the American Protective League. This is a little fascist moment in our history that, has been pretty much buried and is seldom mentioned. Now, in 1917, as the U.S. was about to enter World War I, there was much talk about American patriotism. Now, in Chicago, advertisement executive A.M. Briggs was deeply concerned with this question of American loyalty. So, he decides to write to the head of the pre-J. Edgar Hoover Federal Bureau of Investigation, Bruce Belaski. He writes to him about an idea that had been fermenting inside his head for some time. I am writing to you with the express purpose of suggesting the formation of a volunteer group of loyal Americans who would aid in the country's national defense duties. Now, Briggs, of course, offered himself as the head of such a patriotic group. And Briggs was soon summoned to Washington, D.C., where FBI Chief Belaski enthusiastically approved of the idea, and the two men founded the American Protective League, or APL, with divisions in every major city across the country. Now, membership in the APL gang quickly ballooned to approximately 250,000 members nationwide. All of these members very eager to display their patriotism and their ultra-cool, new and nifty federal badges. Yeah, they were actually given badges. But the problem was that not exactly everybody defined patriotism in the same way. For example, the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW, also known as the Wobblies, an organization formed by socialists to radicalize the labor movement. Now, the Wobblies had a simple but effective philosophy. The bosses can't hurt us if we all stick together. Now, on a spring night in 1917, a group of armed and masked men forced their way into a boarding house in Butte, Montana. Their target was Mr. Frank Little, a member of the IWW Executive Board. Now, the American Protective League, or APL, dragged Mr. Little out of his room and beat him up and lynched him, singing God Bless America while Little danced in the air and slowly choked to death. Now, at barbershops and bars all across the country, the APL's work was much discussed and much admired. Those bastards are un-American, all right. The same should be done to every one of them unpatriotic sons of bitches socialists. Now, even the New York Times, who called the lynching deplorable, applauded the APL and the feds for making short work of treasonable conspirators against the United States and saving the taxpayers wads and wads of cash. Now, in the halls of Congress, the incident was also being much discussed. Those with no allegiance to our nation have no right to squeal when our citizens hang one of them up, said one elected official. Now, under political pressure, President Woodrow Wilson responded with a somewhat contradictory statement, a classic flip-flop. There is a danger of which we must be aware of when citizens take the law into their own hands. Still, there is much to be said in favor of patriots. Wilson took no further action to reprimand or punish Briggs and his politically motivated vigilante group. Now, during the summer of 1918, the APL ganged up with the FBI, the Army, local draft boards, and police, and basically an unofficial state of martial law was declared in order to hunt down any and all men who failed to answer the nation's call to war. Now, in Pittsburgh, Boston, Chicago, Detroit, and New York, APL members rounded up thousands and thousands of draft resistors. In early September, New York City becomes the focal point of APL's target. And the American Protective League, goes in an all-out effort against slackers, radicals, and pacifists. New York newspapers ran daily reminders that all men between the ages of 21 and 31 were to carry their draft cards and identification at all times. The APL, the American Protective League, made damn sure that they did exactly that. Your papers, please. Now, on September 3rd, 1918, a united force of more than 5,000 police, military, and APL members marched down Broadway. It was the beginning of an incredible armed roundup of U.S. citizens. You can't do this, yelled one. It's unconstitutional, yelled another in the crowd. But I'm an American. Eventually, 50,000 men were rounded up and detained in the name of patriotism. Now, the detainees, the people that were rounded up, were kept for hours, even days, in crowded holding pens. They were denied food and water, not to mention any type of legal counsel. One by one, the prisoners were ferociously interrogated with rubber hoses by the APL, who considered them all as guilty as sin and demanded that they prove their innocence. Now, given the vast scope of the arrests, public opinion began to turn against the American Protective League, and local newspapers took up the cry, labeling the detentions an outrage and a violation of basic human rights. Now, in Washington, Attorney General Thomas W. Gregory was summoned into President Wilson's office, but Gregory adamantly defended the APL to the president. The detentions, said Gregory, have led to the induction of thousands and thousands of men into the armed services. You, as a lawyer, responded President Wilson, must realize that there's a question of constitutional rights here. But the Attorney General, well, he refused to back down. I deplore their methods, Mr. President, but I still not. I won't relent, and the APL will continue. So, it was the president who finally gave in, and Wilson chose to take no action against the American Protective League. And the APL continued its unconstitutional, well, fascistic patriotic activities until World War I ends in November 1918. Now, with no further justification for the existence of the largest fascist quasi-legal gang of political thugs in United States history, the APL was formally disbanded in February 1919. And all members, including Chief A.M. Briggs, were given honorable discharges. God bless America. Now, perhaps the most powerful group of political thugs of all time may have been the ones that took over the U.S. government in 1921. The Ohio